My name is Nicole Paritsky. I'm from Boston, and I'm a senior at USC, and I'm studying critical studies in the film school.
I'm Joanna Korsch. I'm a fine art major, emphasis in photography, and I am from Connecticut.
My name is Guy Wernick. I am a French major, and I'm from New York City.
My name is Julie Van Dam. My primary field of study is Francophone studies, more specifically African literature and film, and even more specifically health and the body and gender.
Okay, so are you happy?
Yes.
I think happiness and emotional satisfaction is on a spectrum. I think that, obviously there are times when you're unhappy, but I think the quality of my life is good, and therefore I would say that I am generally happy.
And are you happy?
Definitely can't answer that.
Yes, with caveats. Yes, I'm happy. I love my job. I love living where I live. I tend to have a good balance of work and social and family and
So on a different note, what type of visual media do you receive the most of, and what types do you prefer?
I feel like the most prevalent is social media. I prefer film and the news.
I prefer watching movies and films in general. I like to watch movies more than I like to watch TV, but I also receive social media stuff. So I get Snapchats and even people sending me funny vines they think or just all that stuff. So, but my favorite's movies.
Yeah.
I like how it can bring you into another world, and I like how they can address problems that you wouldn't really think of. I really appreciate other people's creativities.
I definitely prefer film. That's my favorite. It's probably what I consume the most.
And what parts of film make you happy?
I like how it's like a symphony of all these different mediums. You have the musical component, the sound component, the visual, the theatrical. There's so many different elements.
Yeah.
a lot of Netflix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like TV shows or
Yeah,
movies
TV shows and films, I would say. Mm-hmm.
What kind? Okay. And how do you feel about the way that men and women are portrayed in film?
Well, we've talked about this a lot in a lot of my classes, and we've even talked about, how just the white male in general is portrayed a lot more than women, and not only women, but other races too. We talk about it in front of the camera, so on screen, and behind the screen, so the people who have jobs as producers and directors and all that stuff, because it's women aren't in the industry not as many women are in the industry as men, so not as many women are being projected on screen. So it's kind of that whole thing where males are just being shown and stuff because they're working the jobs.
Yeah.
I think that's something actually that people have been craving.
Yeah.
Is strong female characters and opportunities for women to play these roles, because that's, like Viola Davis said, it's not color that makes a difference, it's not race, it's opportunity. And I would say that about women, I would say that especially about black women, I would say that especially about black queer women or queer men of color.
So I'd like to think there's been evolution, and I think there totally has.
Yeah.
But I think the standards of men and women in that role are different. For a woman, when a woman's portrayed as a boss, there's an overly aggressive, a bitchy quality.
And TV shows particularly? Right?
Yeah, in TV shows, and I guess in print media too, but I think this is more in film and in TV. Or having some hormonal play into that, whereas men, it's authoritative, and there's a completely different expectation of them as sexual creatures too.
Yeah.
The broader media definitely produces certain gender stereotypes. And if you're going to be looking at the mainstream and the studio slate of movies, you have definitely stereotypical kind of female types and male types. But if you look further, to more indie or foreign or smaller kind of productions, you'll get more of a varied a complex kind of depiction of gender.
Uh-huh.
I guess what I would say is there's definitely a shift taking place, but we have a long way to go. You know?
Yeah.
There's a lot of ground to cover still.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you look at the majority of movies out there, you're gonna have a male protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
Like even today, and especially the higher grossing ones, like are generally like the Hunger Games exists, but that's the anomaly.
Yeah, that's true.
And in terms of like the physical image of women, is there a trend that
Yeah, I mean, I
is
think
ideal or just very
Yeah, I
prominent?
think it's kind of like the same as for men in that like you just kind of got to be in good physical shape to be on screen, and it's not really like real images. It doesn't represent like the average like woman or male.
Like what makes the woman type or
In like a romantic comedy, or
Sure,
so I guess the woman type would be she's looking for a man, like extremely searching for a man to complete herself, and kind of defines her happiness by men. She's strong, but she's not aggressive. She's obviously extremely pretty and attractive, and always has makeup and her hair done perfectly. Usually she's white, I would say the predominant amount of the time. Thin. Hopefully, you know, if you take a person like Katherine Heigl, like I feel like she physically kind of embodies what we're looking for, like, or what the media is looking for. So she's tall, she's blonde, she's white, she's got large breasts, she's got a really great body, she's really thin, but also really curvy.
Who's not meaning?
I think that the filmmakers aren't meaning to put women in this light or not meaning to underrepresent them, but it's just either for commercial purposes or because it's just what comes to your mind. Like when you think of a superhero, what do you personally think of? Do you think of a woman? Do you think of a man? When you think of someone getting chased after, do you think it's a man being chased after, or a woman? Or you think of someone being raped, is it a man being raped or a woman? So it's just like all these constructs that we have in our head, we're playing out onto the movies, and I think people just need to be more conscious of the representation on screen.
And I tell my students, every director, every writer writes and puts, you know, a thing in there on purpose. Okay, don't think it's irrelevant. Don't like, you know. And also, the interpretation of a work is not necessarily to determine the director's intentionality. It's also to say, to interpret it how you want to interpret it, and you use the facts, right?
Yeah, so in your non-academic settings, like just with your friends or...
Yeah, we don't really talk about, in non-academic settings, we don't talk about like female representation in the media. It's just not really what we go for. I mean, I think it's important, and I think it's important just like in that fashion, you know, other races have to speak up and say like I know Hispanics are like, don't quote me on this, but like 40 to 60% of the moviegoers or something, and they're hardly ever on screen. So they need to start speaking up about that too, because it's just important. If you feel some way, you should speak up about it, because else nothing's gonna happen.
Yeah.
I think the discussion's super important. I think we do a good job. I think like we live in LA, we probably have a slightly different like perspective on it as someone who lives in a place where the TV and film industry is not as prominent.
Yeah.
You know, I think at a university there's a lot of pressure and discussion about gender equality, but I think the discussion should be happening more, and I think it shouldn't be happening just in forums designed for it. Like, I think where it becomes really important is when you're able to have conversations about things like gender roles and, you know, female sexuality, like in an everyday setting, like you talking to a friend at a coffee shop, and that's when you start to pick up on like some of these social media and pop culture cues.
Yeah. Great.
So how, other than just speaking out about it, how can we improve gender equality and representation in the media?
Well, I think it'd be good to start getting more women behind the scenes as well. So I think that it's really good that the whole indie scene is building, and like people are recognizing the indie scene as more serious now, because a lot of women are in the indie filmmaking industry, and with the rise of the industry, they could transfer over to like more commercial films. So
I think it starts with just education, I guess. I don't know. I mean, that sounds kind of stupid, but I mean, you have to say something. So
That's good.
fuck the man.
But I think there's a lot of things we can do to make it better. I think having equal wage between men and women, especially within the movie industry and the film industry. I know some actors have refused to take more money than their female counterparts, and I think that's a really great thing. I think if more people start to play into that and that becomes like spread across all fields of work, I think that would be really effective.
Hollywood. And I think until there are more female directors, and it's not on women necessarily to do that, it's on like the larger system. I don't know, I mean, maybe if there were a law that made it 50-50, right? 50% women, which could never happen. There are certain countries where there's a law that it's 50%, for example, members of parliament are women and 50% are men. So there's like a quota system. And so ime if there were a quota system, because otherwise I think things are happening, and definitely there are positive, but it's a larger question than just well, if women were given more roles.
I mean, I think it's important because when you look on screen, you see who you're supposed to be, sort of. So if you're role models and all this other woman you're seeing on the screen, you're not getting the correct representation. These aren't the average woman, and you should not make yourself have to be like that.
More importantly than that is just having young girls and young women be able to recognize that it's not real. Then they can have that internal dialogue where they're saying like, okay, this is a constructed image created by, our capital society and not by real people.
And conversely, it affects young boys too, because if women are portrayed as, I mean, I'm gonna pick just like the most extreme, like submissive or always sexy, then the corollary is that young boys have to be domineering, always in charge, they are the conquerors. And while we associate all of that with like good stuff, right, it's like the positive of the negative, that particular binary, it also sets up men into a very rigid idea of what their gender should be and how they should interact with women. And in a more material way, it certainly can manifest itself into ridiculous rules of what women literally can do in the workplace. And it certainly can manifest itself into violence, for example. I mean,
Lastly, why does it matter how women in particular are represented in the media?
Because people, whether it's conscious or subconsciously, people definitely are influenced by the media. So what the media presents to them, they're gonna imbibe and absorb. So if there's a more positive representation or a more diverse representation, that's gonna affect people both consciously and subconsciously.